Welcome to the travel guide for Sal in Cape Verde. Cape Verde is an archipelago off the coast of West Africa. It's south of the Canary Islands, so it's a little bit further to get to, but it is one of the windiest spots during the months of December, January and February. 6 hours roughly from the UK, so similar kind of distance from European airports, and it is a really windy place. We've come here for a week and today there wasn't meant to be any wind, and as you can see behind me, there's loads of kites out and everyone's having a great time. It's quite a small island. We rented a car and it took us about 15 minutes to get from the airport to where we're staying, which is one of the hotels in Santa Maria. Santa Maria is the main kind of beach town, if you like. It's right in the south of the island and it's near where all the major kite spots are. As ever, like everywhere you go these days, there is a Kite Beach, which is where I'm stood at the moment, and we'll show you some drone footage from that area. It's where Me Too and Joe Silver set up their kite school many, many years ago, and it's one of the most popular destinations on the island. You actually find tourists coming here just to look at all the kite surfers and see what's going on as well. So it's become a kind of spot on the map that really is officially a kite beach. As you'd expect, it gets quite busy. So it's the spot where most people come to. It's got the easiest launch. I'm looking out around me now. There's a nice big sandy area for setting up your gear. Obviously, you've got all the instructors on hand and people from the centre as well, so they can help you out too. And everyone's really friendly. All the locals are really nice. If you need your kite launching or landing, they'll be able to help you out. If you were to come here and you just rode at Kite Beach, you'd probably have an awesome time. There's waves on the reef on the outside. Be careful, in the middle, the reef does get dry at low tide, so really watch out for those rocks. If you haven't been here before, ask one of the locals for some information and find out exactly where you need to be riding and what you need to be aware of. So in terms of the kite surfing, what can you expect? We've been on 9-metre kites this week. A lot of people are on 12s. We're wave riding, so we're looking for using a bit of a smaller kite. So if you're twin tipping, bring a 12 and a 9. If you're wave riding, we opted for a 9 and a 7, and I think that's going to be perfect kites for what we need this week. I'd recommend checking the forecast before you go. That's always a good indicator. It's fairly accurate here. We were told it was going to be 16, 17 miles an hour. It's probably upwards of around 20 today, so it's a little bit stronger than it actually looks, but it's a good indication of what kind of kites you want to bring. If you have a look at it, you think, right, it's looking like a really windy week, bring your smaller kites. If it's looking like a light week and not a lot of wind, bring your bigger kites. In terms of the spots on the island, there's a few. Kite Beach is the main one. We've talked about that a little bit already. In addition to Kite Beach, over on the west coast, there are a couple of spots too. One's called Punta Preta, which I'm sure you've heard of. It's one of the most amazing wave locations, and it's where Me Too, Ayrton, Matthew, those guys will be out when it's really good and big. Further south from Punta Preta, there's a couple more spots. There's a new hotel opened, the Hilton, and they've got a centre there, which is a Fanatic centre, which kind of cross shore, a little bit shore dumpy. Didn't look that enticing to us when we went to check it out. Coming south from there, right in Santa Maria, which is the main sort of town of the island where all the life is happening, you've got the Angulo Centre, and that looks like a good place to ride. If you're into winging, perfect. If you're into kiting, it's kind of offshore, a little bit flat. It does work, and actually some of the kite schools are located on that western side of the island because the wind generally comes from the northeast. So the western side of the island's generally pretty flat. So if they've got a boat they can teach from, it's really good for learning. Over on the east side of the island, there's another spot to the north of here, right at the top of Kite Beach. There's a little point break, which works really well. And then further north from there, there's a spot called Shark Bay as well, which is a bit of a drive to get to. Worth talking about the roads. There's a little bit of tarmac on the island, but not a whole lot. We rented a 2-wheel drive Duster. We wanted to get a 4-wheel drive, but we couldn't. And the 2-wheel drive Duster's actually been really good. We've taken it down some amazing tracks. We spent about 3 hours yesterday just driving off-road, trying to find a surf spot. Didn't find anywhere, but had a real adventure off-roading, and the 2-wheel drive Duster did just fine. Just watch out for soft sand. As long as you're on hard sand, you're fine with a 2-wheel drive vehicle, and you should be able to get around and find some good places to go. But most people will come to Kite Beach and they will ride here, and it's actually, as you can see from the drone footage and some of the other footage that I'm showing you, it's an epic spot to ride. It's nice and safe. You've got waves on the reef on the outside, you've got some kind of choppy bump and jump water on the inside, and then right out the back you've got the rolling Atlantic swells. In terms of water temperature and air temperature, it's actually quite pleasant. It's around 20 degrees, 22 degrees. The wind makes it a little bit cooler, so pack a jumper for the evenings. I've been wearing a 2-2 shorty wetsuit, absolutely fine, no problems at all, haven't felt the cold. If you are one of these people that does feel the cold, then maybe consider a full length suit. A few people have been wearing those, but it's actually really temperate. The water's not cold, the air temperature is about perfect, you're never too hot, and the wind, as you can see, is still blowing. In terms of accommodation, you've got two options basically. There are loads of really high-end all-inclusive resorts on the island. From the Hilton to the Rou to the Robinson, hotels like Blue, there's some really nice places to stay. The advantage of the all-inclusive is obviously you don't have to pay for anything while you're here. However, the disadvantage to the all-inclusive is they do feel a little bit impersonal. If you're looking to relax by the pool, you've got a family who want to do that sort of thing, go for the all-inclusive, and then what you can do is obviously leave it every day and come to Kite Beach. From most of the hotels, it's €5 ride to get to Kite Beach. There's loads of taxis on the island, or if you really want to explore and get off the beaten track, definitely rent a car. My preferred option of accommodation, we didn't do it this trip, but I have done it in the past, and that's to check on Airbnb. There's loads of places to stay in Santa Maria, and actually this year Santa Maria seems to be even more alive than it has been in the past. There's quite a lot of restaurants, quite a lot of bars and surf shops and various places that you can hang out, get a coffee and things like that. So an Airbnb in Santa Maria will be a lot cheaper than the all-inclusive. You will have to get your own food and buy your own drinks, but you might find it's a little bit more of an adventure, and you get to see a little bit more of the island rather than being stuck behind the four walls that the all-inclusive has always put up. In terms of social life, in the evenings, there's lots going on in Santa Maria. There's plenty of bars, a couple of nightclubs as well. There's some really good restaurants, so be sure to check those out. If you're staying in an all-inclusive, then obviously the nightlife is what it is. You'll probably end up chatting to Nigel and Vera at the bar who've never heard what kite surfing is and have got no clue. The season runs all year round really in Cape Verde. The windy season is in the winter, but they still get wind in the summer. If you want to be guaranteed wind, December, January, February, getting into March, that's pretty much the one. I've spoken to a few people who've been out here lately, and they've all said that the wind's been amazing, and they've had wind every day of their trip. And that certainly seems to be the same for us as well. So just check the weather forecast before you go. If you're into surfing, there's some really good surf spots on the island. We've been driving around to find them. Annoyingly, we haven't got much swell here at the moment, so it's kind of wind-blown chop. There's a few waves kicking around, but nothing really big. We're gonna get some more waves towards the end of the trip, so hopefully we'll find some surf spots as well. But there are loads of surf spots. There's a really nice beginner one down in Santa Maria by the pier. There's Ponte Preta, obviously, if that's working, you can surf there. And generally on the west coast is where most of the surf spots are, because the wind's obviously from the northeast most of the time. So you'll find like nice offshore glassy conditions. It's worth noting that it is all over lava rock reef. So it is quite a challenging spot for surfing, unless you're at that easy spot down in Santa Maria by the pier. I'm going to make a short mention on security because we've had this brought to our attention a couple of times. Generally at Kite Beach, it's very safe because it's Kite Beach, it's where all the kiters are, there's a lot of people around. It's quite hard for someone to actually sort of break into something and get away with it without someone seeing them and them getting into trouble. However, when you go off the beaten track, spots like Ponte Preta, Shark Bay, you are going to be very isolated on an island where the population generally haven't got an awful lot. And if you leave your iPhone on the dashboard, chances are it won't be there when you come back. So just kind of be a bit savvy. We've actually really enjoyed putting all our phones and stuff in the safe at the hotel and coming out for the day without any electronics at all. It makes it feel a bit more like an adventure. We've been driving around the island using an old paper map as well, which has been really quite exciting. I think I'm going to wrap up there. Cape Verde, it's windy. There's phenomenal waves when you get a good swell forecast. Even when the swell isn't that great, there's always waves to be found as well, so you're gonna have a good time. Perfect for beginners, well, maybe not so much. Great for intermediates. If you're into bump and jump, twin tip, riding, jumping off some waves, it's phenomenal for that. If you're into wave riding, this place is probably my top pick for this time of year. It's not a long flight, it's not an expensive flight, and it's quite reasonable when you're here. You can get an Airbnb, 3 bedrooms for about £600. Our flights, I think, were 300 quid. So when you think about it, you could probably get here with a few mates, and it wouldn't cost you much more than £600 in terms of travel and accommodation. And then it's not too expensive whilst you're here either for food and drink. The conditions, it's warm, it's windy, you're gonna find plenty of waves, you're absolutely gonna love it. I've been blown away. I've come here a few times, and every time it's been with a brand, and when we come with brands, we tend to get stuck in one spot, using their equipment, can't really travel, you're on their time zone, and so it's never really been a destination that I've kind of fallen in love with. This trip though has completely changed that. Me and Jim have been off the beaten track, driving around, exploring different beaches, riding different spots, and just seeing what the island has to offer. And what really makes it feel fantastic for me is you really feel a bit like a bit of a pioneer. You rock up to Shark Bay, there's nobody there, there's no one kite surfing. We rode upwind to a spot this morning, there's no one kite surfing there. So if you want the comfort of other kiters and the safety of Kite Beach, you've got all that. If you want to get off the beaten track and have a bit of adventure, you've got that in spades too.